Well, let's talk some more about the situation in Gaza. I'm joined now by Ilan Goldenberg. He's former Chief of Staff to the Special Envoy for Israeli-Palestinian negotiations at the US State Department, now Senior Vice President and Chief Policy Officer at J Street. Ilan, thanks indeed for joining us here.
Thanks for having me.
Despite all the talking while Prime Minister Netanyahu has been here in Washington, D.C., has the prospect of a ceasefire changed at all as you see it?
Well, I mean, look, we have some positive developments. We're now in the phase of diving deep into the weeds on questions of how far will the Israeli military withdraw out of Gaza? What does aid look like coming in? When do the hostages come out? All these kinds of questions. So that's a positive development. However, we still have this fundamental question, which is, will Prime Minister Netanyahu seriously negotiate an end to the war, which has been Hamas's condition for a ceasefire and an end now going on for 18 months. You know, we had a deal a few months ago. It involved both a hostage release and aid going in and Palestinian prisoners coming out, but it also involved a commitment to talk about what the end of the war could look like. And that discussion never happened because for Prime Minister Netanyahu to have that discussion really ends up putting a lot of pressure on his domestic political coalition and could collapse his government. So are we in for just another temporary ceasefire, or could this actually be the beginning of the end of the war? We still don't know.
But he has left using this very strong language that if that permanent ceasefire is not achieved within 60 days, that it would be achieved by using the heroic force, as he put it, of the IDF. Can the US stand over that sort of threat from the Prime Minister at this point?
Well, the real question is, like, what is he actually talking about? That makes really very little sense whatsoever. Like, force by itself is not going to end this war or remove Hamas. I think we've learned that, and we've learned that from U.S. experiences in Iraq and in Afghanistan, and Israel is learning it now again, too. You need a plan for the day after that it actually involves like a real political plan for Gaza, right? A real security plan for Gaza that probably involves bringing in international actors, especially the Arab states. Politics involves some kind of Palestinian entity that brings together, Palestinian Authority, other elements inside of Gaza. Netanyahu has refused to engage on any of this, again, because it potentially brings down his coalition. And so instead he says things like, we will achieve this by force. Like, it's become clear that it is simply not achievable by force, which is why 70% of the Israeli public at this point is saying, okay, let's just end the war in exchange for the hostages. And why you're now hearing increasingly Israeli reservists and former military saying, like, enough is enough. What are you trying to get out of this?
And of course, all the while, Israel is using force. So strikes are landing in Gaza all the time. We just saw those devastating images of that health clinic, 9 children starving and malnourished, killed while queuing for food supplements. Israel is using some US bombs in these attacks. Should the State Department be investigating what US weapons are exactly being used for, given that US law states they cannot be used to target civilians?
Yeah, well, the U.S. has very specific laws on the books associated with providing aid. Those are the same laws that apply to every country in the world. And Israel should be held to the same standard that every aid recipient of, American arms is held. I do think that's what the policy should be. And at the moment, the real question is, can you get to the ceasefire? Can you get a lot of aid in? We have a very dysfunctional aid system going right now with this Gaza Humanitarian Fund that's been set up and supported by the U.S. and Israel that's really limited the number of sites and created essentially chaos and killings almost every day of Palestinians trying to get aid. So I really think we need to work towards getting the old system going again with the UN and international bodies who know how to do this, getting in there and distributing aid throughout Gaza, as opposed to just these very limited number of sites, which are causing both.
But it doesn't seem to be that there's any appetite from the US to do that. I mean, you're talking about that's what the system should be, but it doesn't appear that that's what the system is in the US at the moment.
No, it's not, and I think it should be. I do think if we get to a ceasefire, a big part of that ceasefire will be aid getting in, and will be like changing this system that I imagine will not continue. But the reality is, like, no, it should be happening either way. It should be happening like right now, and like this shouldn't be up for negotiation. It shouldn't be tied to the warring factions. It should just be like we need to get more aid into Gaza. And the situation there, I mean, it's important to remember the situation there is what it is, both because of the steps Hamas has taken and the steps Israel has taken. I think, Israel needs to do a lot better, and Hamas needs to do better and let, in terms of just essentially the Palestinian population who's stuck in the middle between these two warring parties.
Okay, but it is Israel who has limited the humanitarian aid going into Gaza. That is what they have been doing. But we have to leave it there for the moment. Ilan Goldenberg, former Chief of Staff to the Special Envoy for Israeli-Palestinian negotiations at the US State Department, thank you for joining.